Good evening, everybody. It's been a while. I am very sorry. It's been so long that I posted anything or went live or anything like that. Unfortunately, someone that was very close to me had kind of passed just before the holidays, so I took some time to help settle those affairs. And actually, today is, in a way, my first day back, so that's why we're streaming a little bit later, um, and it might be a little rough, but over the course of the last few weeks or so, almost about a month, I realized that even though the exhaust video is not done yet, some of the things that I wanted to share with some people in terms of the exhaust itself and some things to look out for once you have it installed are actually just as important as the installation, right? When you're installing the exhaust, you want to make sure that everything is going as well as possible, everything lines up, everything fits, and the exhaust is performing as you would expect. But there are some things that you should keep an eye out for after you've done the install, because after you've gone through a few cycles, the metal has had some time to expand, contract. The vibrations have kind of shook things a little bit out of place from how you had set them up when you were underneath the car. So the first thing to look for is the tips. The exhaust tips, at least with mine, they're pretty much flush with the diffuser. That's as far out as I can bring them without there being a gap between the clamp for the tips as that's about as far as I can bring the tips without there being a gap between the piping for the muffler and the tips themselves. So one of the things that you want to make sure is that it's not vibrating against the diffuser. I noticed that on startup, mine tends to do that. It doesn't really do that once the car is at operating temperatures or once you get going. It's pretty much just that initial shake at the very beginning. So if you can, there's a little bit of wiggle room where the exhaust sits with the exhaust hangers on the muffler. So if you can shift that, and then there are some kind of like lock washers that you can get. Some kits include them. Let me see here. Like, I believe it's AFE who includes them. Let's see here. So it's almost like a ring. I'm trying to see if I can find one here. It's more or less like a ring with a set screw in it, where, let's get a picture of the hanger itself. So if we're looking at the hanger here, right? So say this is the hanger, and there's a little bit of wiggle room in terms of where the muffler can slide. There's like a little ring with a set screw that you could put on there, because this one in particular, it's set in its place versus the one below, where there's a little bit of give there. And that's kind of the setup that we have. So let's see here. Let's see if we can get another picture to kind of put these side by side here. Bye-bye. Let's see if we can get a good shot of it underneath. Okay, that one doesn't use it. Okay, this is probably where we're going to get it. All right, see, so right there, you can kind of see where the hanger is. And so what I'm saying is when you're looking at the exhaust, right, like there's a little bit of room here. Mine doesn't actually have this lip, so it doesn't, this one actually has a set point, so it's built in with that little bump. The hanger can slide, at least with the X-Force exhaust and a lot of them, it can slide here to a good degree. So depending on the shape of your diffuser and how big your tips are, you're going to have to slide it, and then maybe you'll have to put one of those like those locks there. Let's see, exhaust muffler hanger lock. Maybe that will be better. So I guess you can use a rubber one. It would stop it technically, but the other one is a little bit better because it is a cylinder, and then because you have the set screw in there, it's not going to go anywhere supposedly. Hopefully the set screw can dig into the metal of the muffler hanger, or where the metal is. And so that's one of the things, is making sure that your exhaust tips don't rattle against the diffuser. And continuing down that line is going to be, in terms of the alignment, is going to be your clamps. Now, this is where you're going to be able to get most of your adjustment points in by either bringing the exhaust more into each other, like the exhaust, since it slides onto the other end, allowing it to slide further in or pulling it out will be able to also help you dial in that that adjustment, or how much it shifts to one side or the other. Because you see this bend here, is as you pull this out, it will shift it to one side or the other, or if you push it in. The other thing too that you have to be more careful of versus with the clamps versus the tip adjustment is making sure that the piping is following the channel for the exhaust itself. So when you're sliding the piping in and out of each other, you want to make sure that it's following the grooves of the exhaust channel itself. This is what's going to allow you to make sure that you have the proper length for your exhaust, so that your exhaust tips go out as far as they need to. That way it's not like getting trapped underneath the underside of the trunk, which can, in some cases, if it's not fully sealed, like if there are wires which would allow you to control the valves of your muffler, it could get into the cabin of the car, and that would be a very unpleasant driving experience. So making sure that your clamps are tight enough, and then your piping for when you seal them, they're at the right length, is going to be very important to make sure that you don't have any exhaust leaks, and that your exhaust piping is at the appropriate length. And then the third thing is going to be clearance. If you hear any rattling and your diffuser looks good, your clamps are all tight, the other thing that you can look for is, like, there's this brace underneath the F30s and the F22s and a lot of other cars as well, that the exhaust will run over. And if your exhaust clamps aren't tightened enough, or if they're not properly lengthened or shortened, this could droop down to the point where it kind of vibrates against this bracing here. So let's see here. See, so this is an example. I don't think this is exactly the F22, but the exhaust will run on top of the brace, And in order to prevent it from, sitting on top of it directly, you want to make sure that your exhaust pipes are fully tightened and properly adjusted for their length. That way that doesn't happen. In some cases, the exhaust tubing diameter from the aftermarket manufacturer will be a larger diameter than what came on the car. So in those cases, the manufacturer sometimes, let's see here, I believe it's Autotechnic. I forget how they spell it a weird way. Technic F80. They'll include a brace, or they make a brace that can accommodate the bigger diameter piping that's coming from the exhaust. Let's see here. Okay, so that's a bad example. Let's see, who does it? It's not AFE, it's not Remus. I know somebody does make a different bottom brace in order to accommodate the larger piping. But the only problem is it gives you more space. So some people will put washers here. I don't really like that idea of you putting washers between this plate and the chassis of the car. The main reason is because it reduces the surface area in which that the brace is in contact with. At least with the brace bolted directly against the chassis, all the flex that the brace gets, it's giving to the chassis of the car. When you put washers there, what happens is you create pressure points. You create 6 pressure points that, yeah, it's better than nothing, but it creates that additional pressure. It's almost like there was always like this physics question is, if you have brand new hardwood floor, what are you more afraid of? The 280-pound football player who's wearing running shoes or sneakers, or the 90-pound woman wearing high heel shoes? You're always more worried about the woman who's wearing the high heel shoes because of all of their weight is at one singular pressure point versus a larger area that can distribute the force. So that's one of the reasons why I don't like putting washers there. For companies that that make the bottom brace for additional clearance, let's see if we can get one up here. It would make more sense. Basically, they create almost like a little U shape. This is similar to it. But the one I was thinking about has a little bottom brace for larger exhaust. Okay, so this is kind of it, where it has that bend down and then it makes the accommodation for the larger piping. The only issue with this is if you have a lowered car. If you have a lowered car, every time you go over a speed bump, this could catch, or if there's any debris, this is one more thing to consider when you are lowering your car, or how low you want to lower your car, is that the chassis itself is no longer the limiting factor in terms of clearance, right? Your limiting factor now is this brace, because the ones before were pretty much flat. So they were designed to fit in this little channel here and are more or less flush with the chassis. These other ones that allow you to have more than enough clearance for your exhaust may become an issue. So the thing that I like about the X-Force exhaust is, although it does use bigger piping, it doesn't use so much bigger piping that you have to get one of those braces for additional clearance or use washers. You do have the clearance. It is just a very, very slim clearance. So when it comes to adjusting the length of the piping and tightening down the clamps, you have to pretty much nail it right on. There is a little bit of wiggle room, but you're working within a very fine area in terms of setting the length of your exhaust. So those are just the three things that I would say look out for once you have installed your exhaust. The fourth one isn't really something that you look for. It's something that you would smell, and that's going to be the exhaust gas. And that's going to be right here with your clamp. So making sure that the piping has enough overlap that there's no gaps when you tighten it down is going to make sure that there's no leaks, ensuring that it's set to the appropriate length and that the clamps are fully tightened is going to be very important. Now, I'm still having a little bit of issue. You can see that the pictures right here show that there's a little bit of leaking from the exhaust. So in order to fix that, what I am going to try to use are, see here that this is kind of like a thin band, if you will. It's maybe about 1.5 inches or 2 inches. What I'm going to go with are clamps like this, where it's meant for 2.5-inch piping, which is what we have. And then you need something to go over the slightly larger section as well. So I've already measured this out and this will fit. Let's see here, right? So the 2 different diameter pipings, it will fit. And then now from about 1.5 to 2 inches, we're getting about 3 inches of coverage. So even if there's a small gap between the piping, in terms of it not overlapping, this should be able to seal it and hopefully give us a better seal with the piping. So I am going to try to experiment and go with this. Hopefully that will fix this little bit of leaking that we have here and clear up any. I haven't really noticed too much of a smell. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't know. I don't really know if it's because, I have my windows rolled down or if I'm sitting at a light too long or anything like that. So that's just one of the things that I do have to be mindful of is that. The other thing that I forgot to mention is actually, and this is only going to apply for some of you who have an exhaust where you can control the valve, but you're using the aftermarket system to control it. So if you have to wire into like a power source, so if you're routing the controller up through the trunk liner, then you're going to have potentially that wire running in some hot areas, right? It's going to be running right over the muffler at the very least, or at the tips, which is another hot area. So if your kit doesn't include it and mine didn't, I would suggest grabbing some of this this heat wrap, and this is perfect for the X-Force exhaust. This is the exact one that I used, and it's about 4 foot, which is more than enough depending on how you route it. In my case, it was just enough because what I ended up doing was I dropped the wiring from the trunk right about where the power source is, the cigarette lighter. So I dropped the wiring from there, and then I ran it along the backside up over where the bumper attaches, and then through the heat shield, just so that it's in like the amount of wire that has to run in a hot area is limited as much as possible. So it's not the shortest distance that I could have ran it, which is why 4 foot ended up being just right, because I ran it kind of in a very obscure way, but I wanted to make sure that I ran it so that it didn't have as many chances to kind of be introduced to so much heat, if you will. So with that, we'll open it up for Q&A. Once again, everybody, sorry it's been a while and that we're streaming a lot later than usual. I just had a fair amount of work to catch up on, and you know, hopefully this starts to get us back on track, if you will. And, you know, if there's any other questions you have in terms of like exhaust or anything else, any other videos that we've covered so far, feel free to, you know, send it. And, you know, anything's kind of fair game during the Q&A section. And I just realized this is the first stream of 2025. So I know that it's late, but happy new year to all of you. I hope all of you are having a good start to the new year. And any modifications that you guys have coming up, you know, feel free to reach out in any of the comment sections of those particular videos. If I can, I'm more than happy to help out. So it seems like we don't have any questions for today's stream. If there's anything else that, you know, you guys need, or if there's something else that comes up during the day or any day at all, feel free to reach out to me at VroomTuber. I'm there on Instagram as well as TikTok. Now that thing is back, that very, very short ban. For those of you who had experience, you know, us in the US, I think most of us in the US, it was like less than 24 hours. Like, I feel like I checked it as like, oh, it's banned. And then I, you know, went to sleep, woke up, it's back up. So you can reach out to me on either one of those platforms, as well as, you know, here or any of the videos on YouTube. But if there are no questions, I hope this video was helpful for all of you, and I hope all of you are getting off to a great start in the new year. And I look forward to seeing all of you next Tuesday.